So now we transition to something that's honestly even more serious. So obviously you had the October 7th terror attack that Hamas did against innocent civilians in Israel. And since then, what we've seen is just we snapped right back into 2003 style hysteria. Everybody remembers what it was like on like 9/12/2001. And for years after that, everything was hysteria and mania, and we need retribution and retaliation and revenge, and everybody kind of turned their brains off and was acting very emotionally. And what's interesting is that in this instance, that reaction is not just happening in Israel, it's also happening in the United States of America. Absolutely. Now, we're going to talk more about this with Omar Badr. We'll get into interesting details on this front, but I wanted to talk about this resolution that just passed the House. So the way it's being labeled, the way it's being discussed is a Hamas sanctions bill. Now, stop and think about that. You're a congressperson and there's a Hamas sanctions bill that comes up. What's your instinctual reaction? Vote yes, vote yes, vote yes, vote yes. Mm. But in reality, when you get to the specifics, it's a Hamas sanctions bill and an Iran resolution. And when you get into the details, as pointed out here on Twitter by Michael Tracy using the text of the bill, one of the provisions of this bill is that the U.S. will use, quote, all means necessary to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon.
All means necessary.
All means necessary. So, in other words, well, let's start with the obvious here. We had the perfect solution to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. It was called the Iran peace agreement that Obama and John Kerry negotiated. And according to the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, Iran followed that agreement to a T over a dozen times when they went in to verify it. Trump gets in there, rips it up. Biden runs for president and says, I'll get us back in it. He gets in office. He doesn't get us back in it. Now, all of a sudden, they're passing a hawkish bill where they're like, if we determine that we think you're on the verge of getting a nuclear weapon, we'll go to war against you. So the point here is this looks like laying the groundwork for if Israel's bombing campaign continues in Gaza, Hezbollah might jump in more directly, Iran might jump in more directly, Assad in Syria might jump in more directly, and this now gives us the pretext to go, we don't need a new resolution voting to forthrightly declare war with Iran. Yeah. We already passed this resolution that says all means necessary to prevent them from getting a nuclear weapon, and all you need to do is say, they're this close, so we have to do it. And so basically, in the dead of night, in the hysteria after this attack, they're laying the groundwork for another endless war. And in this case, it would be far, far worse than Iraq. It would be a way worse war than Iraq. Anyway, your thoughts?
They've also laid out the legal justification for, another path they could take here, which is that we've got American troops in the region. They're already coming under threat from Iranian proxies like Hezbollah. And so since our people are under threat, that gives them the green light to act for a certain period of time without even going to Congress. So they've already laid out that legal justification, both in articles and already in, some of the official actions that the White House has taken. I just would urge everyone, we put this up on the screen during the Breaking Point show, take a look at all of the military assets, Haaretz had a great map of this, that have been moved into this region. It is astonishing. You now have 3 U.S. naval groups in the Mideast. You have them planning for a range of possibilities, which could go from, just serving as a deterrent. We're just here, so, you guys think twice about what you're going to do, to being engaged in an all-out regional war, or to, having to quickly evacuate our citizens from the region in an event of a regional war. We've already told Israel that if Hezbollah fully opens up another front, that yes, we would get directly involved in the hostilities. So, this is an incredibly dangerous and, very possible reality. And when you see resolutions like this flying through the House under this new House Speaker who is a total, religious fanatic Christian Zionist who, has already been on the phone with Netanyahu, et cetera. And you hear also things, the justifications that are being given in terms of, did you see this guy, Brian Mast? He's the one that wore the IDF uniform.
Yeah, he said Palestinians are Nazis.
Yeah, and that there are no innocent Palestinians. I mean, the level of rhetoric is so terrifying and, yes, so reminiscent of post 9/11.
And let's also be clear about this. There's a million articles out there now saying Iran-linked militia attacked United States. Iran linked, right. Iran linked. And that is all towards the same goal, which is at a moment's notice, we could jump in and attack Iran and say, well, it was defensive. It was defensive. The fact of the matter is the connections are far wider than they make it seem, right? Like when we're talking about Hezbollah, they are a non-state militia in Lebanon. They are their own thing. Are they allies with Iran? Absolutely. But the idea that there's like a one-to-one connection there is just not remotely true. And even we saw this with the Hamas attack too. All these articles, Wall Street Journal came out and said Iran was actually directing this and helping them set up for it. Well, guess what? Come to find out, the U.S. intelligence agencies had information that Iran was shocked by the scope and the scale of the Hamas terror attack.
Right.
So it was not that they were involved in the planning of it. Again, I want to be clear, they are allies. So yeah, there was commentary coming out from Iran like, we support our brothers in Hezbollah standing up to the Zionists or whatever. Like they made commentary like that. But the idea that they were directly involved in it is not true. And so now every time you see Iran linked, understand the game that's being played. It is very similar to after 9/11, first we invaded Afghanistan, and then they had to build the case. We got to go into Iraq. Saddam Hussein had something to do with 9/11. Saddam Hussein was working with Osama bin Laden. None of that was true, but they didn't care because the goal was already set beforehand that we want to topple Iraq. It was in that list of the different countries that the neocons wanted to topple.
Yeah,
and that's exactly what we're seeing now. Iran is on that list. By the way, Yemen already came out. The Houthis in Yemen already came out and said, we're declaring war on Israel, and they're launching missiles against them. But they're not saying we need to go topple Yemen. But hold on, by your own logic, you're saying if somebody attacks Israel, the U.S. is going to jump in. But you didn't say Yemen. Why? Because that's not one of the countries that's on the list.
That's not
Yemen
the big baddie.
Yeah, Yemen is a poor. Well, technically they are our enemy, but Saudi Arabia, if anything, they were bombing them relentlessly. And the U.S. mindset is, if Saudi wants to get back in and start bombing Yemen, by all means, go right ahead. We're not going to waste our time. They're a rinky-dink country. They're one of the poorest countries in the world. They don't share a border with Israel. So, we're not going to do anything about it. But that just rips the mask off of, I thought you were going to jump in to protect Israel. No, they had these plans beforehand. They wanted to topple Iran for the longest time. It's on the list of countries that the neocon said, well, this is one of the ones we want to topple.
Yeah. When I went on with News Nation and, it got heated over Israel, Palestine, whatever, and the guest before me was John Bolton. And this was in the early days after this
like a week
offensive on Gaza had just started. And already he was, forthrightly making the case for war with Iran. And, the Lindsey Grahams of the world, they're already out there. They were immediately out there pushing hostilities with Iran and trying to tie Iran to the Hamas attacks, and also trying to make this case that, what Hamas did to Israel, that they have global jihadist ambitions and this is a security threat to us as well.
Total bullshit.
Which is total bullshit. But that's, again, the same justifications that were used in, the war on terror. And there with more, there than when you're talking about just Hamas. So, it's just a replay. You can just see it all unfolding so clearly. And that initial Wall Street Journal report that came out that was like, Iran was involved in the planning, which one of the reporters, it's astonishing she even still has a career because apparently she's discredited for previous reporting. But that was disputed by not only American intelligence, but also Israeli intelligence. But you still hear these hawks hanging on to that reporting because they desperately need to make that link for this war that they've been, horny for decades now at this point.
And let's be clear, they also rely on the ignorance of the broader public to make these arguments. So when they say something like Iran or jihadists and they're the #1 state sponsor of terror, this is something you hear all the time. You need to know nothing about the Middle East in order to believe that hook, line, and sinker. Because the fact of the matter is Iran is a Shia theocracy. Now, that's not good. It's not a good thing to be any kind of a theocracy. Right. But they're a Shia theocracy. The jihadists are Sunni extremists. They're Salafists. The derogatory term is Wahhabists. That's who the jihadists are. There's much more of an ideological connection between Saudi Arabia and jihadists and global jihad, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, etc., than there is. ISIS and Al-Qaeda, for example, are mortal enemies of Iran. This is something people need to understand. Also, the right is relying on people not knowing anything to make arguments like, there's Hamas cells and Hezbollah cells that have come into the U.S. through the southern border. If you think there's a Hamas sleeper cell in the U.S. or a Hezbollah sleeper, you literally know absolutely nothing. They are not like ISIS. They are not like Al-Qaeda. They have very, very different goals, a very, very different ideology, and they just rely on people's ignorance to scare them into, okay, let's do the neocons, fight. You got to go save us, right? Like that's the goal. That's the argument they try to build. And now they have the backing of the U.S. government that gives them the green light. Hey, we already passed a resolution that says any means necessary in order to defeat Iran, in order to make it so they don't get a weapon. And it is bad. And then, by the way, the only politicians who are standing up and doing the right thing every step of the way here are the ones who are smeared and maligned the most.
Relentlessly.
It's the Rashida Tlaibs of the world and the Cory Bushes and the AOCs and randomly now the Thomas Masseys, because he's like the Ron Paul of this generation.
Yeah.
He's like a principled libertarian.
Yeah.
And these people are getting hammered by AIPAC, by the corporate wings of their own party. And it's so gross, man. Oh, it's so gross. But look, for the first time in a long time, I'm at least proud of a lot of the Justice Democrats who are there for actually doing the right thing, right?
And let me say, like, it's I really appreciate, Rashida and Ilhan and everybody who signed on to the ceasefire demand and also who voted against some of these resolutions. I want to give a special shout out to Summer Lee and to Jamal Bowman, who I know will be put in significant electoral jeopardy.
Bowman's district is very, very Jewish. He has a very Jewish district.
Yeah, and he's come under fire before for his, just like basic support of Palestinian humanity. Summer Lee almost lost her last race because of AIPAC and the Democratic Majority for Israel, DMFI.
I forgot about that group.
And they're already funding primary challengers against a number of Democratic members explicitly over this issue and the levels of dishonesty they will stoop to as well.
They have an ad against Tlaib.
As anti-Semitic.
They just dropped an ad against Tlaib.
Have you watched it?
I didn't watch it yet, but I know it's all, the typical arguments. Anti-Semite, hates Israel,
like
blah, blah, blah.
This is safe for them.
No.
Not at all. This is very politically perilous. There are a lot of risks for sticking your neck out in favor of just the basic humanity of Palestinians. And there's a lot to be gained from taking the Fetterman approach, which is exactly why he's doing what he's doing.
What
Let's
a
make
loser.
No mistake.
Everybody turned on him like that. As soon as he was like, I co-signed genocide, everybody's like, put on a suit, you fucking slob. Your lovable oaf bit is now dead and gone. Put on a suit, you son of a bitch.
Yeah,
I saw everybody flip like that.
To tie this very quickly back to the first story about Ro Khanna and others who are positioning themselves for president, that's why he's being really super bad and lame on this issue, is because he knows how difficult it would be for him to ever be president of the United States if he actually took a courageous stand on this.
Because there's ideological conformity among these U.S. politicians. So to a certain extent, it's ideological, but there are also massive financial incentives, especially on this issue. When it comes to DMFI, when it comes to AIPAC, even J Street, when it comes to all, they said, if you're for a ceasefire, we're going to primary you. J Street said that. They're supposed to be the liberal.
They're supposed to be the progressive,
the liberal Israel group. Right, yeah, my ass cheeks. So anyway, they got all this money, and they will be directly involved in politics and primaries. They will fund your opponent, and your ass is in serious trouble if you're being outspent 2-1, 3-1, 4-1, 10-1. And so it makes it very difficult for these politicians. You have to actually have a moral core and be willing to fight on it. And
there is no countervailing force on the other side.
No, there's not. It's not like CARE has a big lobbying arm, right?
No, there's no super PAC, pro-Palestinian super PAC ready to intervene and back you in your primary. That doesn't exist, sadly. So yeah, it's very asymmetric landscape. And that's why you see almost unanimous uniformity on this issue for so long.
Yeah. All right, guys, this is just a little teaser clip. If you want to see the whole interview, sign up on Substack. Link below.